Quezon Combat Base, January 21, 1968. General William Westmoreland stands in his command bunker, fluorescent lights flickering above maps scattered with red pins. Outside, the thunder of artillery echoes across the demilitarized zone. Intelligence reports cover his desk like accusatory documents. 20,000 North Vietnamese army troops have surrounded 6,000 Marines in what appears to be a deliberate siege. They're massing for a frontal assault, Colonel David Lowndes reports, his voice steady despite the implications. Every ridgeline, every valley approach. Sir, they're not hiding anymore. Westmoreland studies the aerial photographs, trenches carved into red earth snake toward American positions with mathematical precision. Supply routes thread through jungle canopy like arteries feeding a massive organism. These aren't the scattered guerrilla bands his intelligence officers had promised. This is an army. The general had arrived in Vietnam 3 years earlier expecting to face rice farmers with rifles and political pamphlets. The briefings in Washington painted a picture of primitive insurgents sustained by ideology alone. Communist willpower, they assured him, would crumble under American firepower and technological superiority. But the photographs tell a different story. Bunker complexes that rival American engineering. Weapon emplacements positioned with textbook tactical precision. Communication trenches that would impress European military academies. This enemy had been building, learning, adapting, while American planners debated body counts and kill ratios. General Giap's signature, whispers Major Robert Brewer, the intelligence officer whose reports had been consistently ignored for months. Same tactics from Dien Bien Phu. Draw us into a fixed position, then strangle us with superior numbers and unlimited time. Westmoreland sets down the photographs. Beyond the bunker walls, Marine artillery responds to incoming mortar fire with mechanical regularity. Each explosion illuminates a fundamental miscalculation that would define the next 7 years of war. The enemy wasn't just fighting for territory or political objectives. They were fighting for something American commanders couldn't quantify in their statistical models. The willingness to sacrifice everything for victory, generation after generation, until the last foreign soldier left Vietnamese soil. The siege of Quezon would last 77 days. But the American military's faith in technological supremacy over human determination would never recover from what they discovered in those red dirt trenches surrounding their isolated outpost. The shock began in 1965, when Lieutenant Colonel Harold Moore landed in the Ia Drang Valley, expecting to encounter local militia. Instead, his 7th Cavalry faced the 33rd North Vietnamese Army Regiment, professional soldiers who had been fighting French, Japanese, and now American forces for over 25 years. These aren't farmers with pitchforks, Moore radioed to his command post after the first engagement. They're moving like regulars. Disciplined fire control, coordinated assaults, tactical withdrawal under pressure. Someone's been training these people. American intelligence had catastrophically underestimated their opponent. Pentagon briefings described the North Vietnamese army as technologically inferior guerrillas dependent on Chinese advisors. The reality proved devastatingly different. Many NVA officers had studied at Soviet military academies. Their enlisted ranks included veterans of Dien Bien Phu, men who had already defeated one Western superpower through sheer determination and tactical innovation. General Vo Nguyen Giap, architect of Vietnamese strategy, had been preparing for American intervention since 1954. While American military colleges taught maneuver warfare and firepower superiority, Giap studied his enemy's psychology. He understood that democratic societies couldn't sustain unlimited casualties for limited objectives. His strategy wasn't to win battles. It was to outlast American political will through systematic attrition. Colonel David Hackworth, one of America's most decorated Vietnam veterans, later wrote, "We went over there thinking we were fighting World War II in the jungle. We brought tanks and helicopters and B-52 bombers to fight an enemy that measured victory in decades, not months. They weren't trying to hold territory. They were trying to break our spirit." The first major shock came during Operation Starlight in August 1965. Marine intelligence predicted they would face 2,500 Viet Cong irregulars near Chu Lai. Instead, they encountered 4,000 NVA regulars equipped with modern weapons, coordinated communications, and sophisticated tunnel systems that had taken months to construct. Major General Lewis Walt, commanding the Marine Amphibious Force, reported to Washington, "The enemy's tactical proficiency exceeds our intelligence estimates by orders of magnitude. These soldiers demonstrate fire discipline, unit cohesion, and tactical flexibility that rivals our own forces. They're not fighting like guerrillas. They're fighting like an army that expects to win." But the deepest shock wasn't tactical. It was psychological. American commanders had been conditioned to believe that superior technology and training would inevitably triumph over inferior equipment and ideology. Vietnam shattered that assumption with mathematical brutality. The North Vietnamese army absorbed casualties that would have destroyed Western military units. During the Battle of Hamburger Hill in May 1969, NVA forces accepted a casualty rate of 89% rather than abandon their positions. When American forces finally captured the hill, they discovered the enemy had evacuated their wounded, but left behind detailed maps of American troop movements, radio frequencies, and tactical procedures. "They were studying us," reported Captain James Spruill, one of the few officers to recognize the implications. "Every engagement was a laboratory experiment. They lost more soldiers, but they learned more lessons. We kept winning battles and losing the war." Intelligence reports from 1966 revealed the scope of American miscalculation. The Ho Chi Minh Trail wasn't a primitive footpath. It was a sophisticated logistics network capable of moving 20 tons of supplies daily through territory subjected to constant aerial bombardment. NVA engineering units had constructed underground fuel depots, ammunition warehouses, and medical facilities that remained operational despite intensive B-52 strikes. General Westmoreland's own intelligence officers began filing reports that contradicted official Pentagon assessments. Major Robert Brewer wrote in December 1967, "The enemy's willingness to accept casualties appears unlimited. They view this conflict as a continuation of their struggle against foreign occupation, not a separate war. They're fighting for their homeland. We're fighting for policy objectives they're willing to die to prevent." The psychological impact on American commanders proved profound. Officers trained to achieve decisive victory through superior firepower found themselves facing an enemy that treated tactical defeats as strategic investments. Every destroyed NVA battalion was replaced within weeks. Every captured position was recaptured the moment American forces withdrew. By 1968, American military leadership faced an unprecedented crisis of confidence. They commanded the most technologically advanced military force in human history, supported by unlimited resources and complete air superiority. Yet they couldn't defeat an enemy that possessed nothing except unshakable determination to fight until the last American soldier left Southeast Asia. The first shock had become permanent revelation. Technology couldn't conquer willpower, and firepower couldn't destroy the human capacity to endure unlimited sacrifice for ultimate victory. The numbers told a story that American military planners refused to believe until statistical evidence became undeniable. By December 1967, the United States had dropped 1.5 million tons of bombs on North Vietnam, more explosive tonnage than the entire Pacific theater of World War II. Yet North Vietnamese army infiltration into South Vietnam had increased by 300% during the same period. Defense Intelligence Agency reports classified top secret until 1995 revealed the mathematical impossibility of American strategy. Despite 2,700 B-52 sorties targeting the Ho Chi Minh Trail network, NVA logistics capabilities expanded from moving 30 tons of supplies weekly in 1965 to 20 tons daily by 1968. Each bomb that missed its target, approximately 70% according to Air Force statistics, provided scrap metal for North Vietnamese weapon manufacturing. Colonel Jonathan Ladd, Defense Intelligence Agency Southeast Asia Chief, compiled data that shattered Pentagon assumptions about enemy capabilities. The North Vietnamese Army demonstrates organizational resilience that contradicts everything we know about military systems under pressure, his classified 1968 report stated. They're not degrading under bombardment. They're adapting faster than we can adjust our targeting. The most shocking statistics concerned casualty replacement rates. American intelligence estimated that NVA forces required 18 months to replace combat losses and restore unit effectiveness. Actual replacement time: 6 weeks for infantry battalions, 10 weeks for artillery units, 14 weeks for specialized engineering companies. North Vietnam was graduating 40,000 military-age recruits monthly from training camps that American bombers couldn't locate or destroy. Financial data revealed the economic sustainability of North Vietnamese willpower. The Pentagon spent $120 billion on Vietnam War operations between 1965 and 1968. North Vietnam's entire military budget for the same period, $3.2 billion primarily supplied through Chinese and Soviet aid programs. Cost per American soldier killed, $320,000 in enemy expenditure. Cost per North Vietnamese soldier killed, $18,000 in American expenditure. Major General Joseph McChristian, Westmoreland's intelligence chief, documented enemy tactical innovation that American military colleges had never encountered. They're conducting real-time battlefield adaptation, his February 1968 assessment concluded. Every engagement produces immediate tactical modifications. They're learning from our mistakes faster than we're learning from theirs. The most devastating statistics concerned North Vietnamese recruitment rates versus American draft resistance. Between 1967 and 1969, North Vietnam inducted 85% of eligible males aged 18-25, with voluntary compliance rates exceeding 90%. American draft resistance increased from 2% in 1965 to 34% by 1969, requiring federal prosecution of 172,000 draft evaders. Psychological operations data provided the starkest evidence of enemy willpower superiority. American leaflet drops promised monetary rewards for NVA defections. $5,000 per deserter with weapons, $50,000 for officers with intelligence. Total successful defections during 3 years of psychological warfare: 347 individuals from an estimated NVA force of 300,000 soldiers. The Ho Chi Minh Trail statistics demolished assumptions about primitive logistics capabilities. By 1969, this simple footpath comprised 12,000 miles of roads capable of supporting truck convoys, bicycle columns, and foot traffic simultaneously. American intelligence identified 3,000 anti-aircraft positions defending supply routes that remained operational despite 400,000 tons of targeted bombing. Medical data revealed the enemy's capacity to sustain catastrophic losses while maintaining combat effectiveness. North Vietnamese Army Medical Corps achieved casualty evacuation rates of 89% for wounded personnel and 67% survival rates for critically injured soldiers treated in jungle hospitals. American medical superiority, helicopters, field hospitals, advanced trauma surgery, produced only marginally better outcomes despite massive technological advantages. Communication intercepts provided the most disturbing evidence of enemy morale sustainability. NSA decryption specialists analyzing captured NVA radio traffic reported consistent message content focused on tactical coordination rather than complaints about casualties or supply shortages. Their communications demonstrate professional military discipline under extreme pressure, concluded Major Robert Morrison, NSA Southeast Asia Analysis Chief. No indication of morale problems or unit cohesion breakdown despite sustained losses. The final statistical revelation concerned strategic patience versus American political timelines. North Vietnamese planning documents captured during the Tet Offensive outlined military objectives extending through 1985, assuming continued American escalation and unlimited casualty acceptance. American strategic planning focused on achieving decisive results before 1970 midterm elections. By 1969, Department of Defense analysts had compiled irrefutable statistical evidence. The North Vietnamese Army possessed willpower that could absorb unlimited punishment while maintaining strategic offensive capability. Every metric of military effectiveness, recruitment, training, logistics, medical support, communications, morale, indicated an enemy prepared to fight for decades regardless of casualties. The data proved what American commanders couldn't accept. They faced an opponent for whom tactical defeats were strategic investments, temporary losses were permanent lessons, and immediate casualties were acceptable costs for ultimate victory measured in generations rather than years. Mathematics had become the enemy of American military confidence. Colonel David Hackworth set down his pen and stared at the letter he would never send to his wife. The date read March 15, 1969, Firebase Charlie, Mekong Delta. Outside his bunker, artillery fire thundered across rice paddies where his battalion had been fighting the same NVA regiment for 8 consecutive weeks. "Patty," he had written, "I don't know how to explain what we're facing here. These aren't the enemy soldiers we trained to fight at Fort Benning. They're something else entirely." Hackworth had arrived in Vietnam in 1965 as one of America's most decorated combat officers. 2 tours in Korea, expert marksman, specialist in unconventional warfare. The Pentagon had selected him specifically to assess North Vietnamese Army capabilities and recommend tactical modifications for American forces. His classified reports to Washington told a story that contradicted official assessments. The NVA demonstrates tactical patience that exceeds anything in American military doctrine. They'll accept 70% casualties to hold positions that have no apparent strategic value, then abandon those same positions without a fight when tactical advantage shifts. They're playing a different game with different rules. The moment that shattered Hackworth's confidence occurred during Operation Junction City in February 1967. His battalion had cornered an NVA company in a rubber plantation near Tay Ninh. Superior firepower, tactical air support, artillery advantage, everything pointed to decisive American victory. "We had them trapped," Hackworth wrote in his never-sent letter. "Completely surrounded, outgunned, no escape routes. Any rational military force would have surrendered or negotiated withdrawal terms. Instead, they charged our positions in broad daylight. Not a suicide attack, a calculated tactical maneuver designed to inflict maximum casualties while breaking our encirclement." The NVA company lost 89 soldiers out of 120. Hackworth's battalion suffered 23 killed, 67 wounded. But the psychological impact proved devastating. "They fought like men who had already accepted death," he continued writing. "Not fatalistic, not desperate. Calm, professional, tactical. They were teaching us something about warfare that we didn't want to learn." Captain James Webb, serving under Hackworth's command, later documented the enemy's tactical sophistication in his combat diary. "Their wounded don't cry out. Their officers don't shout orders. They coordinate complex maneuvers using hand signals and predetermined timing. When one of their soldiers falls, another takes his weapon and continues the mission without missing a step. They fight like an army that's been at war for generations." The most disturbing revelation came through prisoner interrogations. Hackworth had captured a young NVA lieutenant during a night ambush near Duc Hoa. The soldier spoke fluent English, having studied at Hanoi University before military service. During questioning, he explained North Vietnamese strategy with academic precision. "You Americans fight for territory," the lieutenant stated calmly despite his wounds. "We fight for time. You measure victory in kilometers captured. We measure victory in years survived. You have better weapons, better training, better supplies. But we have better patience. We will be here when you leave." Hackworth wrote in his report, "This 23-year-old lieutenant understands strategic warfare better than most American general officers. He's not fighting to win tomorrow's battle. He's fighting to outlast America's political commitment to Southeast Asia. They've studied our democracy more carefully than we've studied their determination." The colonel's letter to his wife continued with observations that would prove prophetic. Every engagement teaches them something new about American tactics, technology, and psychology. They're documenting our procedures, timing our response patterns, mapping our decision-making processes. We're giving them a graduate education in modern warfare, and they're using that knowledge to design our defeat. Hackworth discovered that NVA forces maintained detailed intelligence files on American units, including psychological profiles of individual officers. During a firebase raid, his soldiers captured documents containing accurate assessments of his own tactical preferences, leadership style, and probable responses to specific combat scenarios. "They know me better than my own staff officers," he wrote. "They've predicted every major decision I'll make before I make it. We're not fighting an army. We're fighting a military university that uses American soldiers as test subjects for improving Vietnamese combat effectiveness." The breaking point came during his final engagement before rotation home. An NVA battalion had surrounded his firebase for 3 days, accepting massive casualties from airstrikes and artillery bombardment. On the 4th morning, they simply disappeared. Not defeated, not destroyed, but strategically withdrawn after accomplishing their objective of studying American defensive procedures under sustained pressure. Hackworth never mailed the letter to his wife. Instead, he filed a classified report recommending immediate strategic reassessment of North Vietnamese capabilities. The report was buried in Pentagon files and declassified only in 1995, 20 years after Saigon fell to the same patient, professional, unbreakable enemy he had tried to warn Washington about. His final words proved the most accurate. "We're fighting people who measure success in generations. They'll endure anything to outlast us." From the 17th parallel to the Mekong Delta, American commanders discovered that North Vietnamese willpower wasn't confined to specific battlefields. It was a strategic philosophy that manifested across every theater of war with identical determination and tactical sophistication. In the northern provinces near the DMZ, Marine General Lewis Walt documented enemy behavior that defied conventional military logic. "They're not defending territory," his classified report to Washington stated. "They're defending the concept of resistance itself. Every hill, every village, every road junction becomes a laboratory for testing American resolve against Vietnamese endurance." The siege of Con Thien in September 1967 demonstrated this geographic expansion of enemy willpower. North Vietnamese forces accepted 3,200 casualties during 44 days of continuous bombardment rather than abandoned positions that offered no tactical advantage. When Marines finally captured the firebase, they discovered extensive tunnel networks, underground hospitals, and ammunition depots that had required months of construction under constant aerial surveillance. Colonel David Hackworth observed similar patterns throughout the Central Highlands. "It doesn't matter if you're fighting near Pleiku, An or Dak To. The enemy demonstrates identical commitment to accepting unlimited casualties for achieving limited objectives. They're not trying to hold ground. They're trying to break our willingness to continue fighting for ground that has no strategic value." In War Zone C, northwest of Saigon, the 25th Infantry Division encountered NVA forces that had been operating in the same jungle areas for over 3 years despite continuous American sweep operations. Major General Ellis Williamson reported, "We've cleared this territory 17 times. Each operation results in significant enemy casualties and weapons captures. Yet within weeks of our departure, intelligence indicates full restoration of enemy strength and capabilities." The geographic scope of Vietnamese determination became most evident along the Ho Chi Minh Trail network. From mountain passes near Dien Bien Phu to river crossings in the Mekong Delta, North Vietnamese engineering units maintained supply routes through territory subjected to the most intensive bombing campaign in military history. Captain Robert McNamara, Air Force targeting officer, documented the impossibility of disrupting enemy logistics through aerial bombardment. "Every bridge we destroy is rebuilt within 72 hours. Every road crater is filled before our next reconnaissance flight. Every supply depot we eliminate is replaced with 3 smaller, better camouflaged facilities. They're not just repairing damage, they're improving their infrastructure faster than we can destroy it." In the mountains of Laos, American Special Forces advisors working with Hmong irregular troops encountered North Vietnamese Army units that had been fighting continuously for over 5 years without rotation to rear areas. Major William Sullivan reported, "These soldiers have been living in jungle conditions under constant air attack, with minimal supplies and no prospect of relief. Yet they maintain military discipline, tactical effectiveness, and combat morale that exceeds many American units serving 6-month tours." The Mekong Delta revealed another dimension of geographic willpower expansion. Navy Lieutenant John Carey, commanding swift boat operations, documented enemy tactical adaptation that occurred simultaneously across hundreds of miles of waterways. They're learning from engagements in the northern delta and applying those lessons to operations in the southern provinces within days. Information sharing and tactical coordination across this geography indicates command structure sophistication we never anticipated. Along the Cambodian border, the 1st Cavalry Division discovered NVA base areas that had been under development since 1963, 4 years before major American ground commitment. General George Forsyth reported, "They were preparing for prolonged warfare before we decided to escalate our involvement. These aren't reactive defensive positions. These are strategic preparations for outlasting whatever force we committed to Southeast Asia." The geographic expansion of enemy willpower proved most devastating in urban areas during the Tet Offensive. From Hue to Can Tho, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces demonstrated identical tactical patience and casualty acceptance in environments ranging from ancient imperial capitals to modern commercial centers. Marine Colonel Cheatham, commanding forces in Hue City, observed, "They're fighting house to house with the same determination they show in jungle warfare. Urban combat, mountain warfare, delta operations, the environment doesn't affect their commitment. They'll accept total unit destruction to hold positions that serve no military purpose except demonstrating their willingness to die rather than compromise." Intelligence analysis revealed the strategic implications of this geographic expansion. Major Robert Morrison, NSA Southeast Asia Specialist, concluded, "Enemy willpower operates independently of tactical circumstances, terrain advantages, or casualty rates. Whether they're fighting at sea level in the Delta or at 3,000 feet in the Central Highlands, North Vietnamese forces demonstrate identical commitment to outlasting American political patience through sustained resistance." By 1969, American military commanders faced an unprecedented strategic reality. They opposed an enemy whose determination transcended geography, weather, tactical circumstances, and casualty rates. The North Vietnamese Army had transformed the entire landscape of Southeast Asia into a testing ground for measuring American political will against Vietnamese endurance. Every mountain, every valley, every river had become a battlefield where technological superiority confronted generational commitment to independence through unlimited sacrifice. January 30th, 1968, 3 a.m. General Frederick Wyan stared at situation reports flooding his command center as coordinated attacks erupted across South Vietnam. 36 provincial capitals, 5 major cities, 64 district towns, and 50 hamlets, all under simultaneous assault by North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong forces that American intelligence had deemed combat ineffective just weeks earlier. The Tet Offensive shattered every assumption about enemy capabilities, strategic thinking, and willingness to accept catastrophic losses for psychological victory. In a single coordinated operation, North Vietnamese commanders demonstrated that their true target wasn't South Vietnamese territory. It was American public opinion and political resolve. "They've sacrificed their entire southern infrastructure for one psychological blow," reported Colonel Charles MacDonald, intelligence chief for Military Assistance Command Vietnam. Every Viet Cong cell south of the 17th parallel has emerged from hiding to participate in what amounts to organizational suicide. They're trading their underground network for prime-time television coverage. The numbers revealed the scope of enemy commitment. Over 84,000 North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong troops participated in coordinated attacks that had required months of preparation while maintaining complete operational security. American intelligence agencies, CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, had detected no indicators of an offensive involving nearly 100,000 enemy soldiers moving simultaneously across a 600-mile front. In Saigon, Viet Cong sappers breached the American embassy compound at 2:47 a.m., holding the grounds for 6 hours while television cameras broadcast images of guerrillas fighting inside the symbol of American power in Southeast Asia. The tactical objective held no military value. The psychological impact proved devastating. Ambassador Ellsworth Bunker later wrote, "They turned our embassy into a television studio for demonstrating American vulnerability. 19 sappers with satchel charges accomplished what 500,000 American troops couldn't prevent. They brought the war into American living rooms with undeniable visual proof that we couldn't protect our own headquarters. The ancient imperial capital of Hue became the Tet Offensive's most revealing battlefield. North Vietnamese forces occupied the citadel for 26 days, accepting a casualty rate exceeding 90%, rather than surrender positions that offered no strategic advantage beyond demonstrating their capacity for unlimited sacrifice. Marine Colonel Stanley Hughes documented enemy tactical patience that defied conventional military logic. They're fighting room to room in ancient buildings that collapse under artillery fire, accepting total unit destruction to hold positions for one additional day. Not military objectives, symbolic objectives. They're teaching us that willpower trumps firepower when the stakes are measured in decades, not months. The most shocking revelation came through captured documents outlining Tet Offensive objectives. North Vietnamese planners never expected military victory. General Vo Nguyen Giap's strategic assessment, captured by special forces near Khe Sanh, stated explicitly, "Tactical defeat acceptable for achieving strategic psychological impact on American domestic opinion. Military losses sustainable. Political gains permanent." Intelligence analysis revealed the mathematical precision of enemy sacrifice. North Vietnamese forces lost approximately 58,000 soldiers during the Tet Offensive, more casualties in 6 weeks than American forces suffered during the entire war to that point. Yet their strategic objective succeeded completely. American public support for continued escalation collapsed permanently. CBS anchor Walter Cronkite's February 27th assessment crystallized the psychological victory North Vietnamese willpower had achieved. It seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate. The enemy had traded tactical destruction for strategic success through superior understanding of American political psychology. The siege of Khe Sanh, occurring simultaneously with Tet attacks across South Vietnam, demonstrated enemy capacity for coordinated operations on multiple fronts while maintaining tactical discipline under massive firepower disadvantage. North Vietnamese forces surrounded the Marine combat base for 77 days, absorbing 2,600 casualties daily from B-52 strikes while maintaining siege positions that required constant reinforcement under bombardment. General Giap later revealed that Khe Sanh served as psychological warfare rather than military objective. "We knew Americans would commit massive resources to defend isolated outposts. While their attention focused on preventing another Dien Bien Phu, our forces prepared nationwide offensive that would demonstrate their inability to protect South Vietnamese population centers despite overwhelming technological advantages." The strategic implications proved devastating for American military confidence. Lieutenant General Philip Davidson, Westmoreland's intelligence chief, documented the psychological transformation among American commanders. Tet destroyed our assumption that superior firepower and technological advantage guaranteed tactical victory. The enemy demonstrated willingness to accept total organizational destruction for achieving psychological objectives we never recognized as military targets. By March 1968, American military leadership confronted an enemy whose strategic thinking operated on temporal scales that exceeded democratic political patience. The North Vietnamese army had proved they could absorb unlimited tactical defeats while achieving strategic victory through superior understanding of their opponent's political psychology and commitment limitations. Tet wasn't military defeat. It was education in warfare conducted by people prepared to sacrifice everything for independence, measured in generations rather than election cycles. December 18, 1972, 7:52 p.m. Hanoi time. Air raid sirens wailed across North Vietnam's capital as 129 B-52 Stratofortresses approached their targets in the largest strategic bombing operation since World War II. President Nixon had ordered Operation Linebacker II, the Christmas bombings, to force North Vietnamese negotiators back to Paris peace talks through massive aerial punishment. For 11 consecutive nights, American strategic bombers dropped 15,000 tons of explosives on Hanoi, Haiphong, and surrounding military targets. The operation represented America's final attempt to break North Vietnamese willpower through technological supremacy and strategic terror. The results would prove definitively that no level of destruction could overcome an enemy's determination to outlast foreign occupation. General John Vogt, commanding 7th Air Force operations, believed that sustained B-52 strikes would force immediate North Vietnamese capitulation. No nation can withstand strategic bombing of this intensity and continue organized resistance. We're destroying their industrial capacity, military infrastructure, and civilian morale simultaneously. They'll negotiate within days. The North Vietnamese response contradicted every prediction of American strategic planners. Instead of seeking immediate ceasefire terms, they accelerated surface-to-air missile production, implemented urban evacuation procedures that had been rehearsed for months, and continued Paris peace negotiations without modifying their demands for complete American withdrawal. Captain James Mulligan, shot down during the third night of Linebacker 2, later documented enemy resilience during his imprisonment in Hanoi. The bombing was continuous, massive, devastating. Entire city blocks disappeared. Yet every morning, Vietnamese crews cleared rubble, restored utilities, and maintained normal civilian activities. They treated strategic bombardment as temporary weather, rather than military pressure requiring political concessions. The most revealing statistics concerned North Vietnamese air defense capabilities. Despite facing the most intensive bombing campaign in military history, they shot down 15 B-52 bombers and 11 fighter aircraft using surface-to-air missiles manufactured in underground factories that continued operating throughout the Christmas bombings. Enemy tactical adaptation occurred in real time. Missile crews modified firing patterns daily to counter American electronic countermeasures. Colonel Jack Broughton, Air Force intelligence analyst, reported unprecedented enemy learning curves. They're improving their air defense effectiveness every night. Day 1, they fired 12 missiles per B-52 kill. Day 7, they're achieving kills with 4 missiles per aircraft. They're conducting graduate-level military education, using our bombers as instructional material. Hanoi's civilian population demonstrated willpower that matched their military forces. Despite losing electrical power, water supplies, and heating fuel during December's sub-freezing temperatures, evacuation proceeded according to predetermined plans without panic or mass casualty incidents. Soviet diplomat Ilya Shcherbakov reported, "Vietnamese civilians displayed discipline and organization that exceeds wartime London during the Blitz. They're treating American strategic bombing as confirmation of their resistance effectiveness rather than reason for surrender." The psychological impact on American air crews proved devastating. Major Robert Lodge documented declining bomber crew morale in classified reports. "We're flying the most dangerous missions since World War II against targets that are rebuilt within hours of destruction. Railway yards we bombed on Monday are operational again by Friday. They're repairing damage faster than we can inflict it." North Vietnamese negotiator Le Duc Tho demonstrated enemy strategic patience during resumed Paris peace talks. Rather than moderating demands under B-52 pressure, he informed American diplomats that Christmas bombings had strengthened North Vietnamese resolve to continue fighting until achieving complete independence. "You can bomb us back to the Stone Age," he stated calmly, "but we will continue fighting from the Stone Age if necessary." The most devastating intelligence revelation came through intercepted communications between Hanoi and field commanders throughout South Vietnam. Despite strategic bombing of their capital, North Vietnamese forces maintained coordinated military operations across all fronts without degradation in tactical effectiveness or unit morale. Major Robert Morrison, NSA analysis chief, documented enemy communications that contradicted American strategic assumptions. Their message traffic indicates no deterioration in command structure, supply coordination, or combat readiness, despite sustained bombardment of their political and military headquarters. They're conducting business as usual while absorbing the most intensive air campaign in military history. Operation Linebacker 2 officially ended on December 29, 1972, after achieving none of its strategic objectives. North Vietnamese negotiators returned to Paris without modifying their demands. Military operations in South Vietnam continued without interruption. Industrial and transportation targets were restored to full capacity within weeks. The strategic implications proved catastrophic for American military confidence. General Vogt's final assessment acknowledged the failure of technological supremacy to overcome enemy willpower. We've demonstrated that strategic bombing cannot break a population's commitment to political independence when that population views foreign occupation as unacceptable regardless of consequences. President Nixon's own assessment, declassified in 1995, revealed his understanding of the ultimate lesson. North Vietnamese willpower exceeds our capacity to inflict punishment. They're prepared to accept destruction of their entire country rather than compromise on their demand for complete American withdrawal. Christmas bombings had proved that no level of military pressure could overcome an enemy fighting for independence on their ancestral homeland against foreign forces fighting for political objectives they couldn't clearly define. By 1973, American military confidence had undergone complete psychological transformation. Officers who had arrived in Vietnam expecting technological superiority to guarantee tactical victory now confronted an enemy whose willpower operated beyond conventional military logic. The psychological impact proved more devastating than any battlefield defeat. Colonel David Hackworth documented this transformation in his classified final assessment. We've discovered that modern warfare isn't about destroying enemy forces, it's about breaking enemy will to continue fighting. The problem is that our enemy's will appears unbreakable. They've reversed the equation. Instead of us breaking them, they're breaking us psychologically. The collapse began with statistical dissonance that American commanders couldn't reconcile. Despite achieving favorable kill ratios in every major engagement, despite maintaining air superiority throughout the conflict, despite possessing unlimited logistics and technological advantages, American forces found themselves losing strategic ground to an enemy that should have been defeated years earlier. General Crichton Abrams, Westmoreland's successor, captured the psychological crisis in his confidential communications with Washington. Every metric indicates we're winning. Body counts, weapons captured, territory cleared, enemy bases destroyed. Yet the enemy grows stronger while our position deteriorates. They're teaching us that military statistics mean nothing when your opponent measures success in decades rather than quarterly reports. The most profound psychological impact occurred among American field commanders who had witnessed North Vietnamese tactical patience firsthand. These officers returned to staff positions with fundamentally altered understanding of warfare that contradicted everything taught in American military schools. Major General Hal Moore, architect of air mobility tactics, later wrote, "Vietnam taught us that courage and technology aren't enough when facing an enemy that views tactical defeat as strategic investment. They weren't trying to win battles. They were trying to outlast our political system's capacity to sustain casualties for objectives that most Americans couldn't define." Intelligence officers experienced the deepest psychological transformation. Men trained to assess enemy capabilities through conventional metrics, equipment, training, logistics, morale, discovered that North Vietnamese strength derived from factors that American military doctrine couldn't quantify or counter. Colonel William Colby, CIA station chief, documented this analytical crisis. "We're trying to measure willpower using tools designed to count tanks and aircraft. The enemy's primary weapon isn't military technology, it's generational commitment to fighting until foreign forces leave Southeast Asia. How do you target that with B-52 strikes?" The psychological breaking point came when American commanders realized they had become unwitting participants in enemy strategic education. Every engagement provided North Vietnamese forces with advanced training in modern warfare tactics, technology, and American decision-making processes. Brigadier General John Cushman identified the fundamental reversal. "We thought we were teaching them painful lessons about challenging American military power. Instead, they were using our technological superiority as graduate school for defeating technologically superior enemies. We became their professors in asymmetric warfare." Combat officers experienced psychological trauma that exceeded battlefield stress. They had been trained to achieve decisive victory through superior firepower and tactical innovation. Vietnam proved that technological advantage meant nothing when fighting people prepared to accept unlimited sacrifice for ultimate independence. Captain James Webb documented this crisis of military identity. Everything we learned about warfare was wrong. Superior equipment doesn't guarantee victory over superior determination. Better training doesn't overcome generational commitment to resistance. We discovered that military power has limits when facing enemies who refuse to acknowledge those limits. The most devastating psychological realization concerned American strategic assumptions about democratic warfare. Military planners had believed that casualty-conscious democracies possessed inherent advantages over casualty-indifferent authoritarian regimes. Vietnam reversed this assumption completely. General Maxwell Taylor acknowledged this strategic reversal in his classified memoirs. We assumed that our reluctance to accept unlimited casualties represented moral superiority over an enemy willing to sacrifice entire generations. Instead, our casualty sensitivity became our primary strategic vulnerability. They understood our political limitations better than we understood their cultural commitment to independence. Field commanders experienced identity crises that transcended professional disappointment. Officers who had dedicated careers to mastering conventional warfare discovered that their expertise was irrelevant when fighting people whose strategic patience exceeded American political cycles. Colonel Harry Summers documented this psychological devastation. We trained our entire careers to fight World War II in different locations. Vietnam taught us that technological superiority means nothing when your enemy measures victory in centuries while you measure it in election cycles. They weren't fighting to win quickly. They were fighting to outlast us permanently. The psychological transformation proved irreversible. American military leadership had discovered that superior training, unlimited resources, and technological dominance couldn't defeat an enemy whose commitment to resistance exceeded their capacity to inflict punishment. The North Vietnamese Army had broken American confidence through demonstrating that willpower could overcome any level of military pressure. By 1973, American commanders understood they had encountered an enemy unlike any in military history, one that grew stronger through suffering, learned faster through defeat, and planned further ahead than democratic political systems could sustain military commitment. 40 years after the fall of Saigon, American veterans gathered at the Vietnam Memorial, while former North Vietnamese commanders published memoirs that revealed the full scope of their strategic thinking. The epilogue to American military confidence in technological supremacy was written in Hanoi's Victory Museums and Washington's psychiatric hospitals for combat veterans. General Vo Nguyen Giap, architect of Vietnamese strategy, lived until 2013 and spent his final decades explaining to Western historians how North Vietnam had defeated the world's most powerful military through superior understanding of American political psychology rather than battlefield tactics. We never believed we could destroy American forces militarily, Giap revealed in his 2008 memoir. Our strategy was to demonstrate that American technology couldn't overcome Vietnamese determination to fight for independence regardless of casualties. We studied your democracy more carefully than you studied our culture. We knew that sustained casualties without clear victory would eventually force American withdrawal. The long-term psychological impact on American military leadership proved more devastating than wartime losses. Officers who had witnessed North Vietnamese willpower firsthand struggled to rebuild confidence in conventional military doctrine throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Colonel David Hackworth, who served 3 combat tours in Vietnam, later wrote, "I spent 30 years trying to understand how we lost to an enemy that possessed nothing except unlimited patience and unshakable commitment to outlasting us. Vietnam broke something in American military thinking that we've never fully repaired." Post-traumatic stress disorder among Vietnam veterans revealed the psychological cost of fighting an unbeatable enemy. Unlike World War II veterans who returned from decisive victory, Vietnam veterans carried the trauma of technological failure against superior willpower. VA hospitals treated 700,000 cases of combat-related PTSD, directly linked to the psychological impact of facing an enemy that couldn't be defeated through conventional military pressure. Dr. Jonathan Shea, VA psychiatrist specializing in combat trauma, documented the unique psychological damage Vietnam inflicted on American soldiers. These men weren't just wounded by battlefield experiences. They were psychologically damaged by discovering that everything they had been taught about American military superiority was wrong. They faced an enemy that grew stronger through suffering and more determined through punishment. The strategic lessons took decades to acknowledge officially. The Pentagon's classified Vietnam War analysis, completed in 1995, concluded, North Vietnamese victory resulted from superior strategic patience rather than tactical capability. They understood that democratic societies cannot sustain unlimited casualties for limited objectives, especially when those objectives cannot be clearly defined or easily achieved. General Creighton Abrams, who commanded American forces during the final years of combat, later admitted, "We were fighting people who measured success in generations while we measured it in body counts and kill ratios. They accepted tactical defeats as strategic investments in wearing down American political will. We never understood that we were fighting their grandchildren's independence, not today's territorial control." Vietnamese generals who survived the war provided the most revealing insights into their strategic thinking. Colonel Bui Tin, who accepted South Vietnamese surrender in April 1975, later explained, "We knew from studying American history that your country had never sustained long-term military commitment without clear victory. Our strategy was to prove that no level of military pressure could force us to accept permanent foreign occupation of Vietnamese territory." The reconciliation process revealed the scope of Vietnamese sacrifice that American commanders had never fully comprehended. North Vietnam lost approximately 1.1 million military personnel during the conflict, nearly twice American estimates during wartime intelligence assessments. Yet they continued fighting with undiminished intensity until achieving complete independence. Former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara's 1995 memoir acknowledged the fundamental American miscalculation. "We completely underestimated North Vietnamese commitment to fighting until achieving total victory. We assumed that rational actors would seek negotiated settlement when military costs exceeded political benefits. We never understood that they viewed independence as priceless regardless of casualties." The psychological transformation of American military thinking proved permanent. Post-Vietnam military doctrine emphasized quick, decisive operations with clear objectives and exit strategies. The concept of extended warfare against determined opponents became strategically unacceptable for American political leadership. Colonel Harry Summers, author of the Army's official Vietnam War analysis, concluded, "Vietnam taught us that American military power has limitations when fighting people defending their homeland against foreign occupation. Technology cannot overcome unlimited willpower, when that willpower is sustained by generational commitment to independence." Modern American military academies study Vietnam as a cautionary example of technological superiority confronting cultural determination. The lesson remains constant. Superior equipment, training, and resources cannot guarantee victory over enemies whose commitment to resistance exceeds the attacker's commitment to occupation. The final epilogue was written by Vietnamese-American reconciliation programs that brought former enemies together for historical dialogue. American commanders who had fought against North Vietnamese forces discovered that their opponents had respected American tactical skill, while remaining confident that Vietnamese strategic patience would ultimately prevail. The last word belonged to General Giap, who told American historians in 2010, "You fought magnificently as soldiers, but we fought for our homeland's independence. That made all the difference." The willpower of the North Vietnamese Army taught American commanders a lesson that reverberates through military academies and Pentagon briefing rooms to this day. Technology cannot conquer the human spirit when that spirit is anchored in generational commitment to independence. No bomber, no artillery barrage, no tactical innovation could overcome an enemy that measured victory in decades while America measured it in election cycles. It was a war that shattered assumptions about modern military power. American forces possessed every advantage that military science could provide: air superiority, advanced communications, unlimited ammunition, medical evacuation, satellite intelligence, electronic warfare capabilities. Yet they faced an enemy that neutralized these advantages through superior strategic patience and absolute commitment to outlasting foreign occupation regardless of casualties. The North Vietnamese army demonstrated that willpower could absorb unlimited punishment while growing stronger through suffering. Every B-52 raid that failed to break their resistance proved that determination trumps destruction when fighting for homeland independence. Every tactical defeat they accepted as strategic investment in wearing down American political resolve revealed warfare lessons that no military academy had taught. American commanders discovered they were fighting people who had prepared for decades of warfare before the first American combat troops arrived in Southeast Asia. Vietnamese strategic planning extended through multiple generations, while American planning focused on quarterly progress reports and annual budget cycles. This temporal mismatch proved decisive. Democratic impatience confronted revolutionary patience in a contest that could have only one outcome. The mathematical brutality of Vietnamese willpower proved undeniable. They accepted casualty rates that would have destroyed Western armies while maintaining tactical effectiveness, unit cohesion, and strategic offensive capability. Numbers that should have represented military defeat became evidence of unbreakable commitment to fighting until achieving complete independence from foreign control. Intelligence officers who spent years analyzing North Vietnamese capabilities concluded that conventional military metrics couldn't measure their primary weapon, the capacity to endure any level of suffering rather than accept permanent foreign domination. This weapon proved immune to technological countermeasures, strategic bombing, and tactical innovation. The psychological impact on American military confidence proved more lasting than battlefield casualties. Officers trained to achieve decisive victory through superior firepower discovered that firepower meant nothing when fighting people whose commitment to resistance exceeded America's commitment to occupation. Vietnam became a laboratory for learning that military superiority has limits when confronting unlimited determination. The strategic lessons resonated far beyond Southeast Asia. Future American military operations would be constrained by Vietnam's fundamental revelation. Democratic societies cannot sustain long-term military commitment against opponents defending their homeland with generational patience. The North Vietnamese army had reverse-engineered American strategic thinking and used that knowledge to design America's defeat through superior understanding of democratic political limitations. Post-war analysis revealed that North Vietnamese commanders had studied American democracy more thoroughly than American commanders had studied Vietnamese culture. They understood that sustained casualties without clear victory would eventually force American withdrawal, while American planners never comprehended that Vietnamese independence was worth unlimited sacrifice measured in decades rather than years. The epilogue was written in the willpower that rebuilt North Vietnam from wartime devastation into a unified, independent nation within a single generation. The same determination that had absorbed American bombing campaigns now focused on economic development, infrastructure construction, and diplomatic reconciliation. Vietnamese willpower proved as effective in peacetime reconstruction as it had been in wartime resistance. American veterans who returned to Vietnam decades later discovered that their former enemies harbored no permanent animosity toward individual American soldiers. Vietnamese respect for American tactical skill coexisted with pride in their strategic victory through superior patience and commitment. They had learned to separate respect for American warriors from rejection of American political objectives in Southeast Asia. The final lesson transcended military analysis and entered the realm of historical philosophy. The North Vietnamese army had proved that human willpower, when anchored in defense of homeland independence, could overcome any technological advantage possessed by foreign occupying forces. This lesson would influence American strategic thinking for generations. Modern military doctrine acknowledges Vietnam's central teaching. Successful military operations require clear objectives, defined timelines, and political commitment that matches the enemy's determination to resist. When these conditions don't exist, technological superiority becomes irrelevant against opponents willing to sacrifice everything for independence. The willpower of the North Vietnamese army stands as permanent testimony to the limits of military power when confronting unlimited commitment to resistance. They fought with patience that exceeded American political endurance, accepted casualties that would have broken Western military units, and demonstrated that technological advantages cannot overcome generational determination to achieve independence regardless of cost. It was a war of fire that consumed American confidence in technological supremacy. It was a war of doubt that shattered assumptions about modern military power. It was a war that changed America forever, by proving that willpower remains the decisive weapon when people fight for their homeland's independence against foreign occupation. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the human cost of conflict, and share in the comments what this war means to you or your family. History's greatest battles are won not by superior weapons, but by superior will.